Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Bande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhusya Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. Hari Om. We are doing the self-realization, and in the last talk we were talking about how knowledge occurs. So we are looking from the point of how perception occurs, because the seeing means believing, seeing means it is there. So I am there and object is there. We said I don't create an object and then see. Object is there because of Ishvara Srishti. And when I see, we said we only see the reflected attributes and reflected attributes by reflected light. So reflected light, the shape of the chair is the attribute of the chair, and the light is picking up that information, forming an image there. That's how the photography and all that works, which we are familiar, and that is transmitted through the nervous system to the neurons, and it's converted into a software called vritti. Now that's a thought. Now we'll analyze the same principle occurs in terms of inside the mind. What is the inside the mind? How does it occur? And this is the way. Just as the light is all pervading, example that we say sunlight is all pervading, pure light of consciousness is all pervading. That is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, and that consciousness, that Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is like a light of light, as though, because it reveals an object. So what is the light we define? Light is that which reveals an object. Same way, consciousness is that now we are defining as though, because it is like a light, since it reveals the object. When I say I know this object, means I am conscious of this object. It's in my consciousness. So consciousness is revealing the object. So anything that reveals is a light, and ultimately what is the light of all lights is the consciousness. Because how do I know this light is outside light is working? Because I can see. Remember, the light from the object is coming to my eye, forming an image of the light, particular shape of the light and the source of the light. And therefore, I can see the presence of the light only because I am conscious of that. Suppose I close my eyes. You may bring many lights, I will not know. If I am sleeping, which my mind is not there, so whole light gone. Sun is not there, if I am sleeping in the afternoon, so sun is not there, nothing is there, whole world is gone, because I am in deep sleep state. Because I am not illumining, they are not in my consciousness. Consciousness, the mind itself is withdrawn, so mind cannot have the subject-object duality or thought process for it to be revealed. So the point is, the light of pure consciousness is all pervading, and when it falls as though on the mind gets revealed. Number one. So mind gets revealed only because light of consciousness is falling and getting reflected. So without the mind there is no reflection. Other inert object cannot reflect the consciousness. They can only reflect the inertness, that is existence. But for consciousness to be reflected, the mind has to be subtle and subtle material, and since mind is a subtle material, it has a capacity to reflect light of consciousness that is falling on it. So we said that witnessing consciousness is that part of light of consciousness that is falling on that particular the mind. We call it a witnessing consciousness, and when it falls, it gets reflected. And it is the reflected light that I see when I say I know my mind. When I say I know my mind, mind is an object for me to see. So, without going about who is the knower right now, let's say the mind is, I know my mind because my mind is agitated. How do you know? That I know. So, everybody knows their mind. And the mental state also, if they are angry, if they are jealous, if they are full of love, all the modifications of the mind, which are called vritti. Vritti is called modification of the mind. A thought is a modification of the mind, local modification of the mind. And all these things are known because it is getting reflected by the light of consciousness. Without the light getting reflected, I cannot see the chair, table and all that. We went through that. Same way, without the light of consciousness illumining the object, the subtle object which can reflect, and therefore the knowledge of the presence of the mind is known only because it is reflecting the light of consciousness. The same way, if a thought rises in the mind by vritti, when I perceive a light, I have a thought of the object there. So thought is in the mind, object is out there. So thought in the mind, the contents of the thought in the mind are the reflected attributes of the object out there. All these things we went through. So when I see a thought, how do I see a thought? By light of consciousness illumining the thought, getting reflected. Then I can see the thought. Without getting reflected by the light of consciousness, the thought cannot be revealed. Right? In the case of outside light, there will be darkness when there is no light. But in this case, the light of consciousness is all the time there. So, therefore, there is no question of not having light of consciousness because it is ever present, eternally present. It cannot undergo a modification. Na udeti na astameti. Neither it is born nor it dies. So that because it's infinite. Infinite cannot undergo any change. That's what infinite means. So that infinite light of consciousness will be illuminating all the time whether there is an object or not. And this is called Deepa Prakarana in the Panchadasi text. It's like a light throwing on the stage where the actors come and actors go. If there is nobody else also, light will be still there, illumining the absence of the actors coming and going, illumining the absence of the audience in the auditorium also. Same way, light of consciousness can be illumining and getting reflected by the mind for me to know I am the mind. Clear? So, same way, light of consciousness will be illumining the thought that rises in the mind. Not only the mind, thought rises because it is also software. That means it's also subtle. Software means subtle here. So, any subtle material gets reflected. Consciousness can get reflected by the subtle material. So, thought reflects the sunlight, reflects the light of consciousness. Now, reflects to where? In the case of outside light, we say it is coming through the eyes and forming image and forming into the mind a thought and all that. Here, where does it reflect to? In the mind only. So essentially, we are talking about the light of consciousness illumining the mind, and in the process of illumination, the mind itself acts as though it is a local conscious entity. That's what we went through it. Now we have to bring all that information. And that we call it a chidabhasa. So chit means the consciousness, the mind, abhasa means reflection. So pure light of consciousness is falling as though into the local mind, and the local mind, when it reflects, two things happen. One is the local mind gets revealed, number one, because it's reflecting the light of consciousness, and also it acts as though a local conscious entity. It behaves as though local conscious entity. Just as we said, example, that moon as though behaving like a luminous entity by reflecting sunlight. Same way, the mind as though become a conscious entity. Now, the same mind as though splits into subject-object here. So, a thought rises in the mind, and the light of reflection, the consciousness falls on the thought, gets reflected to the mind. Where does it reflect? To the background mind. So you assume that there is a background mind where there is a thought disturbance locally at some point. The light of consciousness falls on the thought and gets reflected back to the mind. And that is the knowledge of, because it's a consciousness, not the normal light. It becomes I am conscious of, just as I am able to see the light of coming from that. So I am conscious of the thought that is reflected. And the reflection depends upon the reflecting medium. Because I see moon and also I see some shapes in the moon because the moon has those shapes. So reflection takes or has a signature of the contents of the moon. When I see the moon, by looking at the moon, I can see what is there on the moon using a telescope and more magnifying. And if you go satellite and all that, what are they seeing? Again reflected light only. Therefore, when I see a thought, the thought is a reflection of the outside attributes of the object, and from the attributes I had to deduce that that is an object. Right? We didn't go through that process because everything is only attributive knowledge. So every object has attributes, and the attributes, only reflected attributes of the object, is gained through the form of a vritti as a thought. And when the vritti is recognized or known, that means I know the reflected attributes of the object of the outside object. What I am seeing is only inside thought. From that inside thought, I extend it to the thought is inside is nothing but object outside. All this is going on, but I don't analyze all that. I say I am only seeing an object. But if the mind is not there, the object is not seen. So mind has to be there. But what does the mind do? A thought process rises. What is a thought? Objective senses cannot understand it because they have no tools to analyze it. There is no software to analyze this software. All software is because of this software only. But anyway, so the thought contents are nothing but reflected attributes of the object out there. Senses cannot gather the material. Thank God chair is out there only. Chair is not coming into my mind. Only reflected attributes of the chair only coming. Reflected attributes of the objects are only coming. Reflected attributes of anything is coming. When the tongue tastes, only reflected attributes of the property of the attribute means property of the thing that I am tasting. Is it a sweet or a hot and all that? Matter still remains as a matter only. Is there really a matter? Is there really chair? Of course, chair is not only attribute, but the chair, real material is there. People argue and the scientists will argue also. So, sir, what is the material? Oh, it is wood. Sir, what is wood? Oh, it is nothing but some organic fibers. So, what is organic fibers? So, he keeps on, because I see a wood at an external, because I see properties of the wood, that reflection of the wood compared to metal or something. But if I go deeper and deeper, what exactly is the material, I ultimately come down to electrons, protons, neutrons, and people are still trying to find out what is the fundamental material. That means we don't know what is made up of. And therefore, Vedanta says you will never find it. You will never find it because it's made up of nothing but pure Brahman. Because Brahman himself became many. How does Brahman become many? Okay, don't believe it, then keep investigating, and you keep banging the atoms and keep getting a smaller God. They said God particle. God particle, if a particle is God, then what about the rest of it? So how does God come and goes? How does he create rest of the particles? So these are all words that are used without much meaning, because they have a temporary life, and those particles are coming and they are disappearing, and they are trying to find out what is the basic fundamental unit of the matter, forgetting that they are ignoring the one who is investigating it. Because at those levels, the very investigation affects the investigated. That's a quantum mechanics problem. So therefore, a conscious entity has to investigate. An atom God particle doesn't say I am a God particle. It doesn't even say I am a particle. A conscious entity has to investigate. So fundamental, what is the fundamental of the universe made up of? Is only analyzing the matter, ignoring the consciousness who is investigating the matter. Oh, consciousness came from the matter. Who says that? The conscious entity says that. So, you cannot investigate the consciousness because it cannot be an objectified for you to investigate. That's why people are studying consciousness, some neurons in a particular position, then consciousness suddenly comes. What does that mean? It means you don't know what it means. So consciousness cannot come and go because he is the one who is investigating is a conscious entity. That is the one we need to investigate. The rest is matter. So matter cannot be conscious entity, but conscious is not a matter for investigation, and it can never be investigated by any other quantum mechanics or super mechanics. Doesn't matter. Objective sciences cannot investigate the subject I am. For that only Vedanta is a science. Now you see why Vedanta is pointing. It's not a religion. Vedanta is not a religion. It's pointing in the direction. So therefore, one has to know precisely what exactly I am seeing here. It says I am only seeing the reflected attributes and I cannot see the matter. Without the matter, there is no reflection. Matter in the form for me to reflect. At the same time, what exactly matter I cannot find out by science. You come to a singularities. That means you cannot further investigate that. And what Vedanta says, there is no absolute matter here. It's only vacharambanam vikaro namadeyam. It's only a form and a shapes and attributes, and so-called matter is also attributive content only. What is there is only pure Satchidananda, and that's you cannot investigate through by your objective, because the very objective tools is not amenable or suitable for investigation. Anyway, that's besides the point here. So what I am seeing is only a thought which is software, and from that reflection of the thought by the consciousness, I know the contents of the thought. What I am seeing, remember the hand and all that, now you apply that. I am not seeing the hand, I am seeing only light reflected by the hand. From the reflected image, I say there is a hand there that I am seeing. What you are not seeing is the hand, not the hand. You are only seeing a reflected medium needed for the reflection, and reflected light has the signature of the reflecting medium. From the signature you have to deduce what is reflecting, and therefore there is a hand, there is a chair and all that. So what you are seeing is only the consciousness with the signature now of the contents of the object out there. Similarly, I am seeing consciousness with the signatures of different objects. What I am seeing is only consciousness. Consciousness cannot be seen directly. I need an object to reflect the consciousness. But my problem is I am paying attention to the source of the thought than the thought or the contents or the reflecting consciousness. What I am seeing is, oh, I am seeing a chair, I am seeing a table. But if you go through the process, chair is nothing but a thought in the mind. Thought is nothing but reflected consciousness with the signature of the contents of the thought. So if I say I am seeing a pot and I say the thought pot rises, so when the consciousness illumines the thought pot, then I have a knowledge of the pot. This is a pot, this is a table, this is a chair. So that object, idam vritti, called idam vritti means this thought contains idam, this is a chair, is a thought in my mind. So how do you know? This is a chair. Yes, this is a chair. What is that? This is a table. So I am expressing that knowledge through a words, but what I am saying is a thought and a thought and a thought and a thought. What I am ignoring is the thought is only revealed, and I could say it is a thought because light of consciousness illumining the thought. What I am saying is reflected light of consciousness only, not the thought even. When the knowledge of the thought, this is the thought, arises spontaneously, without further, another thought rises in the mind that I know this is a thought. That's called subject thought. We are talking about object thought is this is Shruti, this is a chair, this is a table, this is object thoughts. There is a subject thought, says I know this is a pot, I know this is a table, I know. Why? Because I know. How do that I know this is a pot, that is a separate, as though a thought rising in the mind only. A knowledge that I am a knower of this thought, I am a knower of the pot, I am knower of the table, I am knower, spontaneously arises whenever I see an object and I know the object. That means mind is also there behind. So every knowledge involves some object, every thought involves some object that is reflecting the light, all those processes we know, and that thought itself getting reflected by the light of consciousness. So every object is nothing but reflected light of consciousness via the formation of the thought and via the formation of this perceptual process. Clear now? So what I am seeing in every thought is light of consciousness that is getting reflected by the thought with the signature of the thought. And I am paying attention to the signature of the thought, rather than the light of consciousness getting reflected. What I am paying attention, when I say this is a chair and I know this is a chair, so I know thought and this is a chair. I know is a subject thought coming spontaneously because I am a conscious entity. A conscious entity as though joins with the object thought for me to be conscious of the object thought. So consciousness that I am, which is again reflected consciousness, all that we know, consciousness that I am is coming in contact with the object thought and the reflection of that, and therefore I am become conscious of this is a pot, this is a chair, and this is so on. So the subject pure consciousness joining with the object thought for me to be conscious of the object thought. This is what is called perceptuality condition. I have discussed this elaborately based on the Vedanta Paribhasha, and those who want to know, they can go into my website www.advaitaforum.org, and under articles you see Vedanta Paribhasha. It will take you to UK, where Dennis White has edited all my writings, and there you can find that what is perceptuality condition, how perception occurs, and how errors in perception occurs. All that are discussed based on the Vedanta Paribhasha. So it's called critical analysis of Vedanta Paribhasha, where science aspect deviates from the Mimamsa aspect and so on are also discussed there, like time and space and all that too, which I mentioned already, how time is measured and how space is measured. Time is two sequential experiences by an observer independent of the observations. Space is two simultaneous observations of 2 points by an observer who is independent of the observations. This is how space-time becomes an object of knowledge and beyond that. So we analyze how perception occurs outside and also how perception occurs inside. So when I know the contents of any object by the attributes or reflected attributes, and then deduce that this is the object. How do you say this is a chair? Because I am seeing the attributes of the chair, and that's called volition and cognition. From then on, I compare with my memory, going back, what is this object which has the same attributes that I am seeing right now? That's called recognition. Recognition comes only when I have previously cognized an object similar to it, and then I can see an object now and I compare the notes and say, yes, this is a chair because this is how chair looks from my past. Well, you know how the knowledge takes place. When the mother is taking a baby, small child, and the child looks at a cow there, say, Amma, what is that? If you ask, that is a cow. So mother is pointing out and giving a name to the form for the object that the baby is seeing. So beta, that is a cow. Oh, this cow looks black. So for the child, anything looking back in the black in that form is a cow. So he has registered. So next time when the baby goes, there is a white cow there. Beta, that is a cow. Oh, this is also cow. That's also cow. That cow was a black. This cow is a white. So we drop the contradictory qualifications and say cow is that which has a form but can be black or a white or in between. So child is gathering a common attributes of the cow in the mind, and that's what in the epistemological of the Hinduism is called jati. The Nyaya philosophy, Nyaya also talks about jati and so on. What is that? This is a cow jati, means all cows look like this. So anything that looks like falls under the category of cows, which are different from buffaloes or different from dogs and so on and so forth. They have different jatis. So same way, the codification, classification, all that occurs because of based on the attributive content that is registered by and puts into the memory. So I can have a recognition of an object based on what I am seeing. I see this is a chair because I know from the past chair looks like this. That is what Ishvara Srishti. This is my chair and not your chair, don't touch it. This is my superimposition on top of the Ishvara Srishti. That's called Jiva Srishti. We'll come out later because that kind of discussion is going on in the Advaita list now. So therefore, Jiva Srishti can be superimposed on top of Ishvara Srishti also. Where this is mine, that is yours, all the raga dveshas, the anger, jealousies, all my superimposing on top. I like this, I don't like this and all that. Object has nothing to do with it. Oh, I like laddu, I like this sweet, I don't like that sweet. Sweet is a sweet, each has its own property. But like and dislike, I like it, somebody else dislike it, other fellow. So everybody is superimposing on top of the object their likes and dislikes. So this is a part of the Jiva Srishti also. Now if you look this carefully, therefore, I have the whole process is what I am seeing is all the time in every knowledge I am seeing only light of consciousness getting reflected all the time from each thought. So remember, I have to go to meditation. What should I do? Stop thinking. Now you understand that doesn't make any sense because I am not worried about the thought per se. But what I am saying is I have to shift my attention from the thought to the light of consciousness because of which I am conscious of the thought. So every thought is revealed by the consciousness only. When I say I know the thought, there is consciousness right there. But I am paying attention to the object thought and also contents of the thought, ignoring the light of consciousness that is reflected. So it's not the thoughtless state, but I'm not thinking properly in the sense that I have to pay attention not to this, not to this, not to this, because this is an object, that is an object, that's an object. So every thought, not the thought, not the thought, not the thought. But that because of which every thought is revealed. That light of consciousness which reveals the thought. We said, without the object reflecting, I cannot see the original light, even though it is there. Without the thought reflecting, I cannot recognize the presence of the light of consciousness But I'm not able to recognize the light of consciousness because I'm paying attention to the thought. So meditation now is looking at every thought and looking at the knowledge because of which I am conscious of this thought. That light of consciousness, because the thought is being revealed, that you are the subject. So not subject is I know this thought is another thought. That's not what we're talking about. A subject is conscious entity because of which the consciousness reveals the object. Object is revealed, needed for me to recognize the light of consciousness. Now important, see, it is not objectless awareness. Objectless awareness is thoughtless awareness. Thoughtless awareness is not possible because when there is no thought, I cannot recognize the consciousness there. But what about the mind? Okay, you can make the mind as an object for you, but what is the problem? Problem is, again, the mind and the mind, both subject, object are in the mind only, not somewhere else. So I have to use the mind and look at the mind without any thoughts and then say, this is my mind, or I am being revealed by the light of consciousness. I know my mind because the consciousness is revealed. In either case, it's only reflected consciousness that is going to be helpful for recognition of the presence of consciousness that you are. Without that, you cannot realize. So self-realization involves now recognition of the consciousness in every thought that rises in the mind. So I have to develop a subtle intellect to drop the thought contents. Yet I need the thought, but look at that because of which I can see the thought. We'll go into more because this now we are coming into the highest point in terms of what is involved in self-realization. If this is clearly understood, then we have to adopt it, because I cannot but be all the time in the meditation, because every thought is raising. I am paying attention not to the thought content, but to the reflection because of which I know the thought. We'll go into more details now with this understanding and zero in terms of self-realization slowly. Let's stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.